Good morning, everyone. My name is Kevin Haynes. I am the president of Carolina URISA. For those of you who don't know, Carolina URISA is a volunteer nonprofit organization that focuses on the GIS profession. Our primary area is North and South Carolina. We are a volunteer organization, and as such, we are looking for volunteers. So if you're interested in volunteering, please reach out to me or our board. We'd really appreciate it. We can use all the help we can get. I'd like to remind everybody that the URISA International GIS Pro 2022 conference will be held in Boise, Idaho on October 2nd through the 6th. I've been hearing rave reviews about the venue in the downtown area. So this is going to be my first time attending, and I really hope to see you there. This is going to be the very first session in a series of webinars that we're going to be having about education and teaching GIS to children and college students. So it's very common in our profession to find GIS through roundabout paths. And that's fine, and that's a great diversity for our field, but I think it's also important that we reach out to children and expose them to geospatial technology younger and younger. I was inspired to host this webinar through conversations that I had with the heads of all the GIS departments in the state of South Carolina's state government. And we've been having trouble finding and filling GIS analyst positions. So really, the only way to fix that is to really start growing our profession from the grassroots, from children. And so I believe that we have a duty to educate children, to help the next generation become spatial thinkers and geographers and GIS professionals. So that really helps our organization grow. It'll help us be more trusted in the future, and so the board of Carolina URISA would like to be part of this this dialogue, this discussion that we're having within our profession, and how we can help our members really get out there and teach children. So the goal of this webinar series is to provide GIS professionals with information, ideas, and resources, lesson plans, to make it easier for us to engage with children and get into schools and colleges to really help grow the next generation of spatial leaders. So I am pleased to announce our second webinar is going to be on September 29th at noon Eastern Time. Carolina URISA will be hosting Dr. Joseph Kiersky, the Manager of Education at Esri. Both professionally and academically, Dr. Kiersky specializes in GIS curriculum development, nurturing educational partnerships, teaching, and supporting GIS implementation in society through education. So we're incredibly fortunate to have Dr. Kiersky come to speak to us about resources available to GIS professionals to teach children and college students about GIS. So for this webinar, our two speakers are both professors, my former professors from the Department of Geography, Environment, and Tourism at Western Michigan University. Dr. Lisa DeChano-Cook, or Dr. D, as her students call her, her research broadly lies in the category of environmental geography with a special emphasis on geomorphology, natural hazards, and hazard perceptions. She's published on potential for Asian longhorn beetle infestation in Southwest Michigan, downy woodpecker habitat suitability, and wildfire perceptions in Wyoming. Dr. D also has a unique field of study. She has published several articles on sports geography. She's one of the only people in the world to study sports geography. She's studied and published on environmental impacts of Power 5 football conference realignment. She's published on institutional student transfer and how climate change influences what cities can host future Olympic Games. Our second presenter is Dr. Adam Mathews. He specializes in geographic information science and specifically focuses on unmanned aerial systems and how to model and examine environmental problems using UAS. His previous work has utilized UAS remote sensing in vineyards to characterize grapevine canopy in 3 dimensions and relate UAS structure from motion data products to crop performance. He's also done GIS-based modeling of tornado siren sound propagation, LiDAR-based remote sensing of urban structures for population estimation, conceptual work on the use of UAS technology in geography and geographic information science, curricular research on comprehensive GPS lessons, GIS modeling, and the effects of atmospheric warming on wine grape phenology in Australia's wine regions. So with that, I'm going to turn it over, and thank you for all joining.
So this project started, it came out of Adam and I talking about the AGU Centennial Grant and what we could do to possibly get this grant. And I have known Cindy Bloom, a teacher in Comstock Middle School in Comstock, Michigan, for 15 years. And she is a Grosvenor Teaching Fellow, so she's very interested in learning more about how she can get her students engaged in the classroom with geography. A little bit about the Comstock school that Cindy works at. It is a Title I school, meaning that there's greater than 75% of her students are economically disadvantaged. And about 50% of the school is racial minorities. So she's dealing with a very different set of students than what you may see, or this may be exactly what you see. Cindy was teaching 7th grade social studies, as she still is, and this is where we thought would be the best level to introduce this as into her classroom. She thought the students were, of the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade students that she sees, 7th grade would be the best. So as we said, we got funding for this project through the AGU Centennial Grant, and we plan to visit her class one day every 2 weeks throughout the semester. So, and she has 4 classes during the day. So we were there all day. For the most part, that's what we did. You'll see in our timeline here pretty soon that except for a few months, we were there. We did bring other people with us too, to show the students that it wasn't just us that were doing this, but other people as well. And we did talk to the Comstock Township supervisor because we wanted the students to do a community project at the end. And so we wanted to make sure they were on board with this. Adam. So here are the desired outcomes of our project that we put in for the project as well as for the grant. So we wanted the students to understand how the drone works and how they can be used to study the earth, understand how to interpret a topographic map, create landscape representations based on drone data, understand how drones can be utilized for examining landscape changes, and apply the knowledge and technology to help solve a real world problem. Now, again, some of these were actually done, some of them weren't because of COVID. We ended up not being able to do the whole project. The next couple slides will show you what we did and what we intended to do. So in September of 2019, we did go into Cindy's classrooms twice. The first time we went in and introduced the project, introduced ourselves, what we wanted out of the project, what we expected of the students. Cindy had the students do a pre-test assessment before we even entered the classroom. And then for the 2 times that we were there, we had them look at some geography basics. What is geography? What the global grid was like. We talked about latitude and longitude and had them do a mental mapping exercise. We also introduced them to contour lines using contour boxes or water boxes, which we'll show you some pictures of in a minute. In October, when we went in, we started talking about our drones. We had them talk about the basic physics flight. We showed them storybots. We had them build Flybricks drones, which are basically Lego drones. You see a picture of one there. We had them fly some drones. So they tried to fly their Flybricks drones. We had some drones that we pulled in. And then we also had, and Kevin was one of these students, our grad students come in and show them how our big drones work. We showed them how the drones map the landscape. and we demonstrated how they collect the data that is mapped. In November, we introduced the students to ISO lines again. We used topographic maps with basic landscape features. We had them do some mapping activities, and we had them construct a landscape from the map, the two-dimensional map, to a three-dimensional landscape using Play-doh. We did the same thing in December, except instead of using Play-doh, we had them do it in Legos. And it was a very interesting difference, because some people didn't like the blockiness of the Lego, so they couldn't get the curves in the landscape. We also introduced the research project at that point. And then everybody went away for Christmas break. We came back in January and we started talking about the local park that we were going to have the students work in, and what we were really trying to do with them. And we discussed different research projects and had them think about what types of things they were going to do. In February, we went back one more time and we continued talking about the research project. We talked to students about what a park means to a community, how to do a sustainable park, because we were really looking at environmental issues that we wanted the students to do in this local park. And then COVID hit and everything was shut down. So the things that are listed there for March and April is what we were planning on doing and didn't get to, which was actually doing the projects that the students wanted to do. We actually had them do the post-test prior to this, so we were able to get some of that data. And then we were going to have the students have a local day at the park. They've been to the park, but just get them there all at once, have some fun with it. And then we were going to do it in conjunction with Earth Day and kind of make it a presentation for the township. Anybody that wanted to come and see what the students had done could come and do that. Again, that's not something we ended up doing because of COVID, but Adam and I would like to do this again with Cindy's classes and hopefully get through the whole thing this time. The big picture at the bottom there is of the park that we were having the students work in. So you can see it's a small park. It's just a little city park. This picture shows the classrooms we were looking at. There's Adam at the front of the room. One of the first days we were there explaining to the students, they were doing mental maps on this day, and we were having them do a mental map of how they get to school from their house. So we have a lot of pictures of some of the things we were doing. So we're just going to kind of go through those pretty quick. Cindy is over on the right there by the Liverpool Football Club pennant there. And I'm in the front showing students the latitude and longitude so they can understand latitude and longitude better. This was something that we asked them on the pre-test. So we wanted to make sure we covered it here and hopefully found some improvement on this when we did the post-test. The next slide. Here's one of the slides we have. Adam and I are in the front, and on the far left is Tim Hawthorne, who is from Florida. He was in for a seminar for Western that day, so we brought him with us because he is the person in charge of the GeoBus that's in Florida. And so he was very interested in what we were doing and how we were doing it. So we brought him in for that day as well. The next slide is just to show you, Cindy was going around the room with us, helping students when need be, if they had questions or needed some assurances that they were doing latitude and longitude right, or whatever we were doing that day. Next, Adam, please. This was the day we did the contour box or the water box activity. So these boxes are basically clear boxes with the top, and they have a plastic landscape inside. This happens to be a volcano. And if you've never worked with these before, these are really cool with showing students how topographic sheets are made, because you put water in it to a certain point, and then you put the lid on it and you take a Sharpie or a overhead pen and you trace where the water level is. And then you take the lid off, you put more water in, and you trace again. So by the time you get the box full, you have a full topo sheet on top. And that's what they were doing that day. Next, Adam, please. This was the day they were building, one of the days they were building their Flybricks drones. So there were kits, they had instructions with them, the students put them together. In the one picture, we actually have one of the staff from Comstock helping one of the students as well, because the staff and the teachers heard about this and they all were really curious what we were doing. So if they had a chance, they would come in and watch what the kids were doing. This was one of the days the students really liked because they were really interested with the drone stuff. Next, Adam, please. Again, this is just images from building the drones. There were two different types of drones they could build. one that had 4 propellers on it and the other one that had 8 there, so they could pick and choose what they wanted. Next, Adam. So here is the day we had them fly. There's Kevin in both these pictures. The one in the top left actually has another one of our grad students. Grad students had fun building these too, because I don't think they've ever done it before. Kevin, you can see there outside with the student trying to help him fly his Flybricks drone. And again, we had bigger drones that they could fly using our cell phones. And then Claire and Kevin flew our big data collecting drone as well. Next. This was from the day that we had our students try and take a 2-dimensional topographic map piece and mold it out of Play-doh so they get the 3-dimensional map. As you can see here, most of the students did pretty well in this. Some of them were a little easier than others to do, and we actually started out with the easy one first, which is the 2 bigger pictures there, and got to more complex ones as we went along. So we had them do 3 that day so they can understand how things work, starting from very basic, simple things to more complex landscapes. Next, Adam. So these are the pictures that we had from when we had students doing the 2-dimensional to 3-dimensional activity, but using Lego instead. And again, you can see some students really got into this. Some of our students we found didn't like this a lot because they couldn't do the curves. And they were very much like, this isn't working because I can't do the curves. And so we had to really tell them we're not really so interested in the curves, but understanding how the layers work. And once we did that, they were pretty okay with it, but a lot of them really liked the Play-doh part better because of the curve part. Adam, please. So here's just a closer up picture of the landscape that we had them do in the Legos and how some of the students visualize that with their Legos. And again, some of them turned out very, very well. And the students that really didn't mind the blockiness actually fared better with this activity than they did with the Play-doh, just because it didn't matter to them. Adam. So we did decide we needed to do an assessment for our grant. So we decided to do a pre-test, post-test type of assessment. And the activities that you see here are what we use for this. So the first ones were all about latitude, longitude, and then we got into some specifics on topo maps. So what the colors mean. How do you read a topo sheet? So we had 8 of these, and these were the same questions we asked prior to us starting the project, and the same questions we asked when we got done with the basics of geography, which would have been right around Christmas time. And I believe Cindy did the post-test in her class just before Christmas break. So we do have some data on this, which is the next slide. So question 1 was asking about the equator. What's the latitude? So we saw the pre-test 67% had it correct. The post-test 89% of the students had it correct. So we saw an increase of 22%. And as you can see down through here, we had an increase of positive percentages. So percentages getting the question right in all really but one question. And that was question 6, which was asking about what the elevation was at point A. And we realized after when we saw this, you know, a 1% change isn't bad, but it's a change for the negative. And we realized that we really didn't go over this when we did our geography basics. So when we do this again, we will make sure to hit this part as much as we hit everything else. And we also had not a big jump in our contour interval question. That question was, what's the contour interval of this map? So we didn't really talk about that as much. And then again, the elevation at point B. So we do have some things that we noticed we didn't talk about as much that we probably need to next time. But everything else, we had double-digit increases in the rate of mastery of this thing. So we are very happy with the results of this. And Adam's going to take over from here and talk about the drone stuff that we did.
Yeah, and one other thing I wanted to mention too is, especially targeting this age group, is we found as we went through, you know, you see those differences in terms of how the students, you know, fare better with different things. So like, you know, one student really does well with Play-doh, one student really does well with, maybe it's on paper, another does well with Lego. But with this age group, I think one thing we wanted to make sure we did, and we did throughout, was get stuff in their hands, right? So get Play-doh in their hands, get Lego in their hands, and let's see how that might help them think about landscape and mapping. And even like with this one, with the Play-doh, you get these differences here, right? Where it just clicks differently in different students. It's very interesting to see. So like this example at the bottom here, right? Because of the way the contour lines are, those students tended to see that as, I'll make it as layers and then stack them. There's nothing wrong with that, right? It's one way to make this model, where other students see it more generally as like, this is what, this landscape would look like overall, like a smooth type of thing, which is what you see in the yellow one in the middle here. So one of the things I found that was just like fascinating about doing this was just week to week seeing what clicks with what students. But I think I can confidently say that when we had stuff in their hands, things always went better. And I think you could argue that that's in every classroom, that when you're doing things, with your hands, it's easier to get engaged and learn. So this is actually, so what we did is a big part of this. So that, Lisa mentioned the drone stuff. The goal originally, so we went out the summer before we started to actually go in the classroom and capture some data with drones out at the park, which was approved by the township. And this is Robert Morris Park. It's on a lake. It's really nice. There was that one picture on the ground. I'll show you this video so you can see what it looks like. I'm just gonna make sure it's muted here. But this is what the park looks like. The idea being that this was a park that they could connect with. It was in their township. If they've never been there, we're going to take them there, which was our goal prior to COVID. We were going to bus them out to the school and basically bus them out to the park and have a day at the park. But unfortunately, due to COVID, we didn't get to do that. But we got data out here, a bunch of aerial photographs that we could then create our own three-dimensional map of the park area. And then when we went through those weeks that you saw in the timeline where we talked about drones, we talked about, okay, well, what are the actual, an introduction to flight with drones, and then basically the introduction to photogrammetry. So we take multiple photos, they overlap, then we can use that to gauge three-dimensional differences and create landscape data. So that's what and there we are waving there. That's what we did. Those were the data we got, with the end goal being that we would use this data toward the end, which we started to do, and then COVID came. And why, if you're wondering, why Play-doh and Lego, these different things, mainly because there are differences in students in terms of what they might get, learn better with. So we wanted to, and then also we wanted to keep repeating the exercise with slight differences so they can improve their understanding over time. But also with the Lego, one of our goals was, that again, didn't get to due to COVID, was we were going to create a at-scale map, or a correctly scaled map is what I want to say, of the park that we were going to leave at the school of Lego. So we would be creating that. We began doing that using the actual data we got from the drone, and then we got taken off course due to COVID. But just to give you an idea, some of the data, what they look like, I'm guessing likely with all of you, or most of you being GIS people, you have some idea about what drones are used for and how they're used. But you can just see here, here's a couple photos near the beach area. So capturing hundreds of overlapping photos like these two to end up creating, typically what you start with using structure for motion is you get a point cloud, which looks something like this. And then that can be used to create more generalized surfaces. So raster surfaces that are, the digital terrain model, or the contours like we taught them in class. So these were the products. So here's orthophoto on the top, created from the drone data. Bottom right would be a digital surface model, meaning it's including everything on the surface. So you can see the buildings where white is really high, black is really low. And then the bottom left is the contour map. So we did have time to get this part in the classroom, which is they had done at that point these different landscapes with Play-doh, different landscapes with Lego. Then we began talking about the park and brought this contour map that you see in the bottom left to the classroom. We put it on a laminated sheet so they could use the Play-doh on it if they wanted to. But basically they created the elevation and the landscape of that using the Play-doh, which this one was more of a challenge because typically when we use like the examples you saw before, they're kind of extreme cases, right? When we learn topographic maps, it's a volcano or it's, these kind of extreme cases. You usually don't have very, just gentle slopes and things like that. But at that point, everything was firing. They got it, right? They were doing really well, and they put the Play-doh maps together, and they were understanding what landscape was, how to create it with Play-doh, and they did really well. Here's an idea. So we were going to do the Lego model. So I put this together in GIS. So we have our contour data from this is the entire park. We focused on toward the top here, which is toward the north, which is the lake area, which is what you saw in the video. And this was how we were going to scale it, where you can see the green dotted box down here in the bottom right. It's about 15 inches. So it'd be 30 inches across. And what we were doing is you can see these dots in here too. How I had set this up in the GIS to aid us in putting this together, which seemed to work pretty well. Again, we got derailed and didn't get to finish it. But these dots are the middle of each Lego brick stud. So that would be the scale of what we were putting together. And again, the goal was that we were gonna, because we were able to get a lot of Legos through the grant, and hopefully we can do this in future iterations of the project out there, is that create the Lego map of the entire park, and then we can leave it out there at the school, so everyone can check it out and get excited about it. So part of the park project that we were doing is basically getting them to think about environmental issues and sustainability. So we introduced to them a couple of different things that basically these were kind of discussion days. And it was actually really interesting to see. We had them work in groups. It was interesting to see what they were talking about, because it was really good discussion. The first one was things to build a sustainable park. So basically, we're talking about this park in Comstock that we just saw. How might we change it? If money wasn't an issue, we didn't have these other barriers, how would you change it? What were the things you would change, just to get them to think about these things? So here was a list of 10 that we gave them. And then we would record in classes, what differences there might be. So we'd meet with 4 different classes in a given day out there. And you can see the important topics did change class to class, where like class 1 was interested mostly in like sustainable materials. They saw as more important, offering recycling, which is typically not done, at least at the Comstock parks. As far as the last time I was out there, it wasn't. Class 2 is more interested in landscaping, keeping it where, native species, things like that. And then uses to sustainable materials comes up again there too. And then you can see what the other classes thought. So basically, what did they see in this list that was most important? And that's what they identified. And then the other thing was we had them think about generally what's good about parks, which this was a fantastic discussion too. It's really good to see what they thought. Also, you learn quickly too, the experiences we all have with parks can differ greatly, where some of the students only knew about, didn't even know that park was there, right? Because this one is off and away from town a bit more, where some had been there, some had no idea it existed. But the parks that they were more familiar with were more in the built up area and had less greenness. So it was interesting to see, based on those differences, what they were talking about. But you can see here are the things that came up with parks that they saw as things that should be important. So safety came up repeatedly, which I think, based on the conversations with that, I think that reflected, that can reflect a number of things. I think it might reflect some things related to income, this being folks in a Title I school where safety for them is a very important concern, where if you were to go to another school, students might not even think about that. So that came up repeatedly. And then I think one thing that came up too that we wanted to stress to them too was how important like trees are and things like that. And they reflected on that, and it was great. It was interesting to see. But yeah, differences between classes again, for sure. And then here were some of we had them write on these sheets because they kind of in their groups they would report back to the class as to what they talked about and things. And here were some of those sheets. So in this case, like in the bottom one, parks have health power, and they, when people go to the park, they exercise. Maybe people go there for, whatever the reason is, right? You can see another one saying they're active at the park, those types of things. And then you can say community is a big one for this top left one, where there are, activities like cookouts and, just getting together with other people was an important thing to that group. So it was really interesting to see with this. And here are some of the comments we got toward the end of the project. So, and I'll just read a couple of them. The first one here, so I learned about making contour maps and enjoyed the Play-doh activities, basically to make landscapes. I learned that with the contour maps, they look easy to do, but you have to take time and do it right and check it over multiple times to see if you map the area out right, which is absolutely, and that's why we repeated. We had different landscape maps, and we'd give them this one. Okay, let's do this one. Okay, you got that one done? Yeah, that looks great. Try this one too. Because we found as they saw different landscapes, you could see it clicking more. Maybe by the second or third one, they're a lot more confident. Okay, now I know what this looks like. I can picture it in my head. Now I'm going to make it with Play-Doh or with Lego or whatever it is. And then we have some comments that came from Cindy that it was really interesting. We would always have we'd spend time with Cindy after the day or during the day just to talk about how things went, where she has a very different perspective with us or from us, right? We're in the university, she's with those students every day. So her perspective was very important for us to make sure we're doing everything, really doing things well and making sure the project's going well. So some of her thoughts, so the project allowed students to engage in a variety of hands-on activities, which she agreed with us in terms of, that would improve their spatial thinking and their visualization of landscape. So I watched the students move from a very novice understanding to being able to create 3D landforms out of Play-Doh or Legos just from the 2D contour map. And not only were students fully engaged, but they were conversing in a manner that showed deeper understanding of the process. And that was something that we definitely observed as we went on. You could tell how much more interested they got after they had done things a few times, which is pretty common in any educational environment. And then she had mentioned about the pandemic too, where we didn't get to finish everything we wanted to, but our goal is to get back in the classroom as soon as we can. It's just been, the ongoing pandemic has just been kind of difficult for engagement in a K through 12 classroom. All right, so I'm going to stop there. I just wanted to thank the township that we worked with, Comstock Public Schools. They were fantastic and really helpful. The AGU, if you don't know what that is, that's the American Geophysical Union, which a lot of geographers go to, are involved with that group, but it's a lot of more hard science, geology, earth scientists type of folks, but it's a great organization. I highly suggest checking it out. And then of course, we had a lot of support from our university and department to engage with this too. So thank you.
Thank you very much for for giving us this presentation. I think that what I really love about this program that you designed, and it's something that came out in a conversation that I had with our next presenter, Dr. Kiersky. We had this conversation about how what we need to do is be teaching a subject using STEM technology and geospatial technology and GIS instead of just trying to teach GIS. And that's something that my team, we go into schools and we teach. We do a lot of summer camps and things like that. And that's something we've struggled with, and that's something we're learning. And that's really important. One of the people that we spoke to prior to this, as we were sending out the materials, information about the session, was how do we get into schools and start teaching geospatial technology if geospatial technology isn't part of the curriculum? And I think y'all did a fantastic job of showing how that gets done. You know, you're teaching something that is part of their curriculum, but you're using geospatial technology. So let's open this up for questions. You can raise your, yes.
Just to go back on that, getting into the schools, one of the things that helped is I've known Cindy for a long time. So one of the first steps is just to identify some schools that might have some teachers that are willing to work with you. And we did, I mean, all summer we spent talking to Cindy about how is it best for us to get this into the classroom? How does it fit your curriculum? Because she was teaching world history, not geography, to her 7th grade class. So we had to figure out a way that would fit into what she was doing and what they might have been doing in some other classes too. So we know they were looking at environmental issues. They were interested in the environment. And so that's how we came at it. But there's plenty of different ways to do that. I mean, you could do that with ancient maps, or, you know, if they're doing history, or, you know, whatever the area is. But we did work with Cindy for like those 3 months pretty intensely to figure out how we were going to make this work.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most important things with engaging in schools is like having a partner, a teacher at the school. That is vital. If Cindy, this wouldn't have worked without Cindy. Like, she's fantastic.
Right.
She would meet with us outside, you know, but also she had to have trust in us, right? And if I was a teacher, I probably wouldn't, you know, university person wants to come, I would be guarded about that, because it's like, oh, what do they want, right? But since Lisa and Cindy had that relationship, there was trust there, and it's much easier to, you know, it's very easy to build on that. But that can be hard to get. So that's one of the toughest things. Kevin, you mentioned an important point too, that you were talking about with Joseph Kursky, which is that teaching about GIS, teaching with GIS, right? Without them even knowing anything about GIS. And I agree. I mean, that is something that's really important in the classroom. Yeah, if you're doing anything about just environmental topics, do they really need to know how GIS works? No, but they could use web maps, right? They could use web maps and use GIS and not actually know how it works to get that point across. Absolutely.
So any questions? You can raise your hand. I can unmute you, or you can ask it in the chat. Do you have any advice for GIS departments, professional GIS folks? I mean, the program you did is a substantial program that, you know, had multiple modules over the course of a semester or a year. Do you have some advice for those of us who would like to do this or parts of this?
You know, there's different ways to go at it. You can do very informally by going out to, say, a local park, and just start flying the drone and see who comes and asks you what you're doing.
That's a good idea.
I mean, that happens all the time, because kids, we had multiple kids that said, oh, I own a drone. So they've been flying them. They just don't know what they can do. They know they can fly. They know that Amazon's going to use them to start dropping packages at their front door. But they don't really realize that, you know, the camera on those are useful if you know what you're doing with them. You know, so even just going and flying, or, you know, taking a map into a school and showing the principal, go, hey, you know, here's a map of your local area. I don't know if you've seen it this way before, or a satellite image, you know, or something. So I think there's, you know, you kind of have to think outside the box. because I see somebody said, Jeannie said in the chat, GIS is part of AP Human Geography, which is great if you're in the high school, right? We were in the middle school. And if you want to get even, into the elementary schools, it's got to be even, a little less, but everybody likes to fly. Everybody likes to play with Play-doh and Lego. My daughter's 14 and she's still building with Legos. So, there's different ways to do that. I'd also say, work with your local, if you've got a college, work with your college, go to the school and go, here's what we're trying to do. And it's not going to be a quick process. It may take you a year of talking to the administration, go, here's what we'd like to do. Is there a way we can work this out? But I think you're going to have to, you as the organization, not the school, is going to have to make those initial steps, because they're not going to come to you, because the teachers already have so much in their curriculum that they have to teach. And if you go, look, this is what I want to do, and they're like, we don't have time to put another thing into our curriculum, but you have to show them that it's not putting another thing in, it's enhancing what they already do.
So we have another question here. They're kind of two related questions. Do you have any documentation on the specific lessons, such as building the 3D map out of Play-Doh based that includes suggested time associated with each activity and so on? Would love to share this with local schools and even show at the career day. And then the other question is asking if these lesson plans would be online. And those are the fantastic questions. And that's also something we're going to be talking about at our next session with Dr. Kiersky. But what about your lesson plans? Will you be publishing them?
Yeah, I mean, one of our plans is to, yes, we've talked about that. We want to do this early on. The main thing was our plan was to do it toward the end of that year, so we could reflect on it a bit, think, okay, what didn't do well? Maybe we should chop this part, or repeat this part, or that type of thing. And then COVID came. And then I feel like we've been scrambling ever since.
Sure.
So we haven't really had the time to sit down and like, let's formalize this so someone can adopt it. But I know, like, I definitely would like to do that. I think it would be incredibly useful for other people to do that.
And Cindy wants us to do it too, so we would use her help because she knows how to write lesson plans. We don't. But we do have all the information, so we can start with Cindy again and go, hey, why don't we start, getting back this ball rolling and start with writing up these lessons that we did so that other people can start using them.
Awesome. And that's
we'll send
something,
them to you, Kevin, you can post them for us.
Yes, I was just going to say, we'll definitely be reaching out to you. And I'd actually asked this prior to my university. I'd asked Dr. Mathews, like, oh, do you have lesson plans for that? Like, we're going to be doing kind of the same thing. So definitely something we're interested in. I've talked to a lot of people who are. So I will be making sure to stay in contact, and we'll use URISA International and Carolina URISA as a platform for really promoting these, because it's definitely something people want. Let's see here. We have another comment here. Don't feel bad. What each of you have accomplished is great. You are just building excitement for when the modules and lessons are published. Definitely. Yeah, we'll definitely.
Thanks
yeah,
for that.
sure.
Yeah, when we originally were talking about this project too, as the drone thing came up early on, because it was like, what are one of those things right now that students can connect with that is just super exciting in geography and GIS. And I was just like, drones, right? Okay, what can we do with it? Okay, and then we thought about the park thing, went out and got some data, and then I was like, well, how can we get the drones in their hands, right? Because there's clearly safety concerns when it comes to, we can't have them flying the large aircraft, you have to be licensed, and there's lots that goes into that, right? So then we found those Flybricks kits, and it was like, okay, well, we can, I'm huge into Lego at home. So I was like, okay, we can get that put in there too. So there are a lot of it too, to build the excitement, right, is to like think of what's the thing that people are really into right now. Drones have worked in that space for several years now. People get really excited. And then, you know, some people aren't, and that's okay too, because that can start some really good conversations too. Like I get that in the, you know, the university classroom, right, with privacy concerns and things like that, but it gets conversations going, right? You could talk about data ethics and things like that. So yeah, it's interesting. It was fun with this. It was, I will say the Flybricks kits though, they were challenging to put together.
And they're challenging to fly too.
They
Very
had problems
challenging to
flying
fly.
them too.
Yeah, they do not fly very well. And yeah, they don't fly very well.
But they do get
Yeah.
put back together very easily, right, Kevin?
Yes, they do. Yeah, they are easy. They're definitely a toy. It's something that I tweeted about them a while back, and it got a lot of engagement on hashtag GIS chat on Twitter, and people were just loving it. At the time, they didn't have any more kits available. Everything was out of stock. It was during COVID and stuff. So hopefully, I haven't checked recently. I posted in the chat a link to Flybricks. Hopefully, I didn't check, but hopefully they have some more kits available.
Yeah, and there are some other, like some of the bigger companies have, so we had it's not made by DJI, but I think they own the company, or they have a relationship with the company, or whatever it is. But they're called Tellos, Tello. We have a few of those, and you can fly those with your phone. Those are nice, really small little drones that fly. Actually, they respond to the controls like a large drone, and there's not many that do that. Usually, they're like, they just don't fly very well. So you're like, you think it's harder than it is. But those ones we had, and those ones have cameras on them. And then Parrot is another company that they had one that they stopped making it. But some of the companies have these smaller drones that's a good place if you want to, you know, get some attention and allow people to actually fly them. And they're pretty durable too, where they can take a hit and they'll be fine. And also they come with these, ours have like cages around them, so you can't, you know, to protect the propellers and hands and stuff. But there are things like that you can use beyond, like the Flybricks. We wanted the building for sure, but if it was just like you were interested in getting them into flying and stuff, you could go the other route and it'd be easier.
Yeah,
That's
definitely.
what somebody had mentioned too. They use local robo at their school, but they said they don't have the building experience, but the students study flight. And we did do a little piece on flight. Like we did talk about yaw and roll and pitch and all of that sort of stuff. So it wasn't just turning it on and getting it up there, but you know, we had to talk about flight, you know, aviation and flight a little bit. And the other thing that hit me when Adam was talking about this, and Kevin, this goes back to your initial question, a lot of schools now have robotics teams and drone teams. And so, you know, getting involved with those is one of a good way to get your foot in the door with those schools. And those drone kits are actually fairly reasonable. I know with Vex, which is the one that we use, they have a drone kit where you get like 10 drones for $2,000 or something, which is fairly reasonable.
Yeah, that's good.
Yeah, and I see that. Yeah, I saw the last comment. Yeah, that's one thing definitely keep in mind, right? There's a lot of, so it mentions like the school board, you know, they oversee what happens in the school with that. Absolutely. We made sure, so like the university has a drone policy too. So we submitted everything to make sure we were good there. And then the school knew everything we were doing from the top down. So yeah, that's an important thing to keep in mind, right? Is like I'm big on, when it comes to drones, I know they're exciting, but also I am big on safety. And if there is any risk at all, I won't do it. It's just not worth it. So you always have to make sure that, you know, check to see and make sure everyone knows and has approved it along the way, right? You got to be careful with those things.
Yeah, and the policies, the policy is a big deal. If you've not flown drones at your school before, your school board's not going to know what to do with it. But you need to have some sort of policy in place.
Yeah, and you can always too, like if you know another school that, like in this case, right, already has a policy, and you approach a school and they're like, we've never done this, we have no idea what to do. You can provide that link, right? Like, this is what a similar school did. Maybe we should follow this, right? And these are the things you should be checking.
Great idea.
Yeah.
Do we have any more questions? Well, I'd like to thank everybody for coming out. We had great attendance. I'm not sure if if the attendees can see, but we had 22 people. Pretty good for our first session. I'll give a shout out to Australian geography teachers. As I was promoting this event, I was sending out to geography associations. I sent it out to one. It had like an acronym in Geography Association. I got an email back. They were super excited about it. Turns out they were in Australia. And so they were like, it's like 1 o'clock in the morning. Is it going to be recorded? So hopefully they'll log on to our YouTube page, which we will be posting this on our YouTube page. I'm going to provide you the link to that right now. This would be great until we can get like lesson plans posted and things like that to go back to get ideas and things like that. So, so this is a new YouTube channel. We don't have anything posted yet, but we will get this posted real soon.
Yeah, and I wanted to say too, anyone, if you're going to do something like this and you just have questions, don't feel free to contact one or both of us. We can share whatever experiences we had.
And you will, I just saw the last post, Joseph Kursky has lots and lots of GIS lesson plans. I've known Joseph for 20 years and he's got lesson plans for pretty much anything under the sun you wanted to look at in GIS. He's got one for it. And if he doesn't, he'll make you one.
Yeah, he's already shared like tons of resources with me already, and we're going to get that posted on our site and start posting those around.
The other place to look for those of you who are maybe in the profession and don't have links to the schools, and I know some of you are school teachers, I saw it in the chat, but the state geographic alliances are still out there and running. Some are running better than others, but that's a good way to get in touch with a lot of the geography teachers in your state as well.
Yeah, that's a really good one. I forgot about that one. That's a good one. Because often too, they know like who's really engaged currently in this type of teaching or whatever. And then it's like, oh, you should go and talk to this person, right? And then that helps a lot.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much. Everyone have a wonderful day. I hope to see you on September 29th. To see Joseph Kursky. I hope you all attend the GIS Pro conference in Boise. That's going to be really good. We're going to have a couple people from the Carolinas there. Hopefully we'll get to meet up. Yeah, so thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Thank you.